Question is like, why do customers go to coffee shops? Why they don't drink coffee at home? Why they don't drink instant coffee? And you could say, well, they like quality. Okay, let's assume they can access quality at home. Why do they go to coffee shops? They go to coffee shops to talk, to connect, to see other people, to be seen sometimes in a particular place, to mingle, to meet other people. So we should not forget that coffee shops back on the day started revolutions, roasted.
Really expert in that space.
Nobody can beat anymore.
Infused
for 20, 30 years.
because it tends to be
their own
When
job.
you were working the land.
$1,000
Per kilo.
Okay, and we are back with another episode of the Acid Makes Coffee Better podcast. I'm here with Yanina Ferreyra of Project Origin. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Cool. So, we just sort of went through your history, but could you just give us a little bit of history on how you got into the coffee industry and what you're doing now?
Yes. I've been working in coffee for more than 14 years now, always based in Australia. I started as a barista, as a lot of us, and eventually moved myself into the area of green beans. I've been doing green beans for 7 years now. And I've done coffee competitions as well. I've done cup tasters, barista competitions, and Brewers Cup competitions. So a little bit of an all-rounder when it comes to the coffee chain. I think probably roasting is my weakness or the area that I know the least. But I work with a lot of roasters, so that helps me a lot to stay.
Learn by osmosis.
Correct.
Cool. And so what are you doing now?
At the
What is
moment,
your actual role with Project?
yeah, at the moment I work with sourcing the green beans for Project Origin, as well as I'm the international sales manager.
Okay, and so what does that kind of involve in a day-to-day, week-to-week, year-to-year?
It involves maintaining relationships at origin with coffee producers for certain countries. It involves talking about projects with them as well. Some of them have to do with community, some of them has to do with processing, forecasting needs, tweaking processing techniques or recipes, and also ensure that all our clients are having the coffees that they do want to get. Creating products that do match them, and of course, creating products that match the competition scene as well. I'm not the only one that does that. Like, we also have two staff members. Well, one of them, the owner, Sasha Sestik, and the other one is Habib Marbani, that also works with sourcing as well.
Okay. And so we can come back to that. There's a lot going on there to unpack, but that idea of having projects, processing versus community, could you just explain a little bit of what that is?
So actually, the name of the company is Project Origin, and it all started because at the very beginning, Sasha Sestik was buying green beans only for Ona Coffee. And he realized that just paying a premium price was maybe not enough. You could pay a premium price, but you actually don't know exactly where that money is going. And sometimes some of the things that are needed at Origin have to do with things that are not coffee related, like different facilities or access to water or access to school. So he decided to start Project Origin as a side project for Ona Coffee originally.
Okay, when you say it's not enough to pay a premium, means you are not going to be able to do enough for the industry as a brand, for example.
Let's just put an example. You may have a coffee producer, and this coffee producer maybe this year can get $4 or $5 per pound for their microlot coffee. And next year, the quality goes, let's say the quality stays the same. But there's issues with weather patterns, for example, and this coffee, he produces a lot less. You can't draw the line between, okay, this quality equals this price. You kind of need to look at the whole picture. And this is when Project Origin kind of like was born out of this idea that, well, we can't just go quality equals this price worldwide and that's it. But we have each context on different of these farms. A lot of these farms don't produce only 90-point coffees, we wish. But a lot of farms also produce bulk coffees. And a lot of the times, selling those bulk coffees is the heartbeat. So Project Origin commenced as an idea in which we could go directly to some of these relationships and create a positive impact. We love to say that we create mutually beneficial relationships. So we definitely want to be very careful with not just going and imposing, okay, you need this, or we're going to work on that, or this is going to be your bonus, but rather work with the coffee producer on what is the thing you want to achieve out of coffee? What do we want to achieve out of coffee? Sometimes green bean people or roasters or baristas we tend to be obsessed with flavor. We tend to be obsessed with quality. Some of us also obsessed with traceability or the story behind the coffee. But definitely coffee producers have other motives to be in coffee, and they might not share the exact same goals. So the idea is to come to the table together with a common goal, or a goal that we can construct between the two of you, to ensure that the producer gets benefit as well as us. And not just creating win-win scenarios, but also making sure that we that we are able to handle lose-lose scenarios, because losses do happen in the world of green beans, and it's important that as business partners, we share those. This is something, I'm sorry, something that... because I've never worked for another green bean company before, when I started talking to a lot of coffee producers, some of them were telling me, well, this is a little bit refreshing, and we actually have not seen this kind of behavior very often. For example, we do a lot of experimental processing. We do carbonic maceration, anaerobics. We've been doing supernaturals for many, many years. And one of our big things was, well, we pay for this regardless of outcome. And a lot of coffee producers were like, we never heard that before. We have been told, well, depends what happens at the end. And we're like, no, we're happy to wear the risk for this kind of stuff. So this is what I mean about mutually beneficial relationships in which we can both achieve our goals, I guess, even if they might be slightly different.
But I mean, where commonly do those like, let's say, goals diverge? Like if you or the coffee industry is chasing flavor, what else would the farmer be chasing, as opposed to because like I'm saying, high cup score would be flavor, would be more money. What else could they be using their farm for?
Sometimes consistency. So for example, they might want to be able to reproduce the same type of quality year after year. 90 points coffee is lovely, but no one can buy entire containers of 90 points coffee. Or at least I have not met those customers yet. If you know them, please let me know. So the thing is, like, it seems to be the goal for us on this side of the coffee chain. We love those kind of coffees. We love to find them. We love to stumble across them. But the truth is, to create a sustainable business, you need to have a little bit of everything. You need to have your, 84, 83 point cup score, and you also need to have your 86, your 87s. You get a lot of customers that go, we don't want something that crazy. We want something that we can rely on, or that we like, or that we buy every year, and it's the same. So when we work with producers, we also work on consistency. We work on the productivity of the farm. You can't just chase the cup quality as much as you need to also consider, okay, is it needed to buy more land? Is it needed to plant other varieties? Do we know that the investment of planting new varieties means that we also need to wait for them to grow and to start producing? Which ones? There's a common misconception in the coffee industry that, why don't they grow geisha if it's so expensive? But it doesn't work everywhere. And a lot of people is chasing a particular cup profile when they think of geisha. And if we suddenly plant it in like a place like Guatemala or Honduras, and it tastes a little bit different, I think Colombian geishas are probably a very good example, then people don't want to pay the Panama price for them. And now the producer is stuck with, 4, 5, 6-year-old trees that they planted thinking this is going to be great. So we have to be very careful on like what's the model to, in a sustainable way, grow the income of a coffee producer.
And then, so how are you choosing partners to work with?
Yes.
And are they different models where it's like, okay, I'm happy to just buy your coffee.
Correct.
We're actually going to invest with these guys, and then maybe we invest in by like actually paying some money for the farm or something like that?
Yes. They are different models, and let me say that in the nature of all relationships, if you go with an open heart, you need to be prepared that your heart might get broken every now and then, right? So you may say, I don't know, I'm a great guy, I'm looking for a great partner, and I'm sure that if I put my absolute best forward, I'm never going to get hurt. And that's not true. So in the world of relationships, especially business relationships, these things can happen too. Sometimes it's not even about the money, but it is about the trust that you can develop. So along the years, we have had our ups and downs. But I would say now, with a lot more maturity behind the company, we definitely look for aligning with values first. So if anybody is just chasing a quick buck, we try to stay away from that. And we notice that, and we see that because we do a lot of, I guess, tailor processing. A lot of our coffee sometimes end up in competitions and they do quite well. So you definitely get approached a lot more going, we want to do it, we want to invest, here's the money, and we're just going to become rich. And then you go, I don't know about that. So definitely aligning with the values first is very important. And then second to that is quality. What is already happening in that farm that we can try to work with. We also get approached by a lot of people going, we do Robusta or we do commercial coffee. Can we work together and learn? Unfortunately, the size of our company cannot sustain that at the moment. We do offer them advice in their pursuit for specialty coffee. But yeah, I would say those two at least, values and where are they starting from. I have a cute story if you want about that.
Sure.
But for example, a couple of years ago, before the pandemic, we were doing carbonic maceration in about 5 countries at that time. And it was getting a little bit like crazy and out of hand. And it was like so many projects to monitor. So we kind of said as a company, okay, that's it. No more babies. This is fine. This is a good number.
What was the first country that?
The first one was Colombia.
Okay.
Yes. And at that time, Sasha came back from one of his trips and said, I found someone in Kenya. We need to do this with them. And Habib and myself were a bit like, please not, like not another one. But, then when we met these producers in Kenya and we realized of the potential, we were like, man, how could we not, And I just came back from Africa. I was in Africa just before Dubai, and our producer who is doing carbonic maceration with us, David Maguta, just won first place for natural coffees in AFCA competition. Okay. Taste of Harvest is like all the African coffees competing against each other. Yeah. Usually Ethiopia takes the first place for naturals, and this is the first time Kenya has taken it away from them.
Oh, wow.
In the collaboration we done with David. So it's very adorable for us to see that, okay, in 2019 we went like, oh, really, Kenya? And now, we had that great achievement. A couple of years ago, we had Martin Shabaya making finals in the Barista Championship using Kenya coffees with carbonic maceration process. So those are the moments when you go, okay, if you find the right people with the right values, I'm sure we can continue to grow.
Got it. Yeah, cool. And if you're kind of looking at like sustainability, the word came up a few times. For Project Origin, what does that mean really? And what do you think it means for us if we're going to have something that we can actually grasp onto and understand and have action taken? What does that really mean for our industry?
Sustainability for this industry is a very complicated topic. And I don't want to say that I have the answer for that entirely. However, for Project Origin, we look at two areas. We look at economic sustainability and we look at the environmental sustainability. We do understand that climate change is a reality and it's already happening. We see it in certain areas, for example, that we're producing a level of coffee that today they're not producing anymore. We are noticing cup quality shifting according to different regions. You get these classic people going, what happened with such and such? Like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, it was great and now it's not. So you definitely can start to see that. But at the same time, I think the economic sustainability, if we can develop a career in coffee and our quality of life improves somewhat from year to year, we should at the bare minimum be expecting the same for coffee producers and in the context that means to them and in the context that they want for that to happen. For example, we might think, okay, this farm needs better facilities or this farm needs a better building or a nicer roof or something like that. And maybe coffee producer is like, I want my kids to go to university. That's what I want. And that's non-tangible. You can't see it. You can't bring buyers to that farm and see that. But if that's what sustainability means to them, okay, we want a better future for our family and this is the pathway we are choosing for that. And we don't know who's going to look after the farm after this generation. We also need to, I guess, as coffee lovers, swallow that reality and be okay with that reality as well. I don't think Project Origin has the key to the sustainability of specialty coffee in the world, but we definitely have arrived to our own understanding of it and with the relationships that we work with.
Do you guys see, in terms of labor at farms, in terms of passing that farm down to the next generation, do you see that as an issue as we move forward?
We are seeing it more and more in the last few years.
These people just don't actually want to be in coffee anymore.
Look, until 2019, I can just speak about myself, right? But like what I was seeing a lot is like you could see the grandfather being the farmer. Then you had the son, which at that time was on their 40s, 50s. They were agronomists or engineers or some form of university-educated generation. And then they were starting to bring up their kids doing cupping and barista and actually really grasping a little bit more the end of the coffee chain. You could see this a lot, especially in Central America. And since the pandemic, there's been a bit of a shift. You also notice in Central America in particular, there's a lot of migration. There's a lot of people leaving and there's labor shortages. So yeah, I see it as a complicated thing as we move forward. Who's going to look after these farms that were looked after? The same maybe families for generations.
And in terms of a more sort of like economic sustainability, where do you think this system is currently really broken, and where do you sort of see, where does more economic, how do we make it more viable for everyone in that chain? Like, for example, for me, I think the only real way is to make the cup price more expensive, right? Because everything flows back from that.
Exactly.
But
yes.
and I've been to Owner in Melbourne. They've got some pretty high priced coffees, but not very many. Like, it's a very small percentage of people who are going in there and willing to pay for it.
But I think it starts with the education of the customer. I mean, at some point in our industry, we had people drinking coffee that was roasted super dark and with sugar, right? Like what we call torrado in Spanish. And eventually there was someone that said, oh, well, maybe we don't need to do this to coffee. And then eventually there was someone that said, actually, if we look at the farm practices, we can also get these other properties out of coffee. And then eventually somebody said, if we chuck this in a tank and control the fermentation, we can also get this much out of coffee. So I think the consumer, if you talk to most consumers, they want two big things. They want good price for what they are getting. So they want affordable drink. But they also want a socially conscious drink, a lot of them as well. And I'm not saying like they are the exact same group. Maybe we could say there are two different groups. But I'm pretty sure if you survey a lot of the specialty coffee customers, they would agree that they want farmers to do better. And I think in that education that we provide to customers, that could be the key to open up a little bit of those pricing structures changing. I mean, coffee is not cheap in Dubai already. What you pay for espresso here is not what you pay for espresso in Australia. So I think in that sense, they're doing great here. But
I was really disappointed by the average quality of espresso in Australia.
Yeah, and that's the other thing as well. Australia is a numbers game. And again, I don't want to pretend that I know the entire industry, right? In Australia, I'm not a business owner. I can only speak of what I've seen. But wages are very high, rent is high, services are high. Yeah. So what you need is your coffee shop to turn enough cash flow for this to be sustainable. And for that, you need a kitchen and you need avocado on toast and you need like a chefs. And so what happens is like you keep pushing the price of coffee down because you want people to come in and then maybe stay and have lunch. And I notice I've been in Australia for 14 years and the price of cappuccino has barely changed. It has changed, but it has barely changed for 14 years, So that is a conversation that we started having in Australia. I remember 2019, sustainability was a big thing. I don't know if you remember, but the entire coffee industry was really into carbon footprint, trying to be
putting like the
zero emissions. This was the conversation we were having. How can this thing be more sustainable? How can this thing be more in alignment with climate change or where the world is going? And one of the things that was thrown out there was like, maybe we are having too many coffees per day. Maybe the model that we were chasing in Australia, where a customer comes to your shop 2 or 3 times per day, maybe this is too much. Maybe they need to have one very good coffee that cost $5, $6, $7, $10 rather than 3 that cost $3.50 and are average quality. Because the quality, what happens there is like when you have a shop that is very busy as well, you start losing perspective of the attention to detail. And look, the pandemic came to kind of like completely shuffle again all those questions that we were having and starting them again. I do think that Australia did take that opportunity to increase some of their prices. I don't think that the increase was enough. But a lot of business owners in Australia would say that it's a very tough market.
Do you know what the average price per kilo of a blend for milk would be in Australia, in Melbourne?
I know specialty prices, right? So I would say the thing is like we use Australia dollars.
That's fine.
But anywhere between 25 to 30 on average Aussie dollars. So that would put you on like 18 to, exactly. Like
So and New Zealand's very similar, like it's even cheaper.
Yeah, it is cheap. So it's complicated.
Which means that the quality of coffee going into those blends is really like scraping the barrel.
Or they're not making much margins. Which is also another way to not make it very sustainable. So the way that we see forward is where we do a lot of education with the roasters that buy from us. We do offer to some of those very close partners that we have ongoing trainings for their baristas, for their actual business. But then we do counting on those baristas to pick up the torch, I guess, and start understanding these realities and start communicating these realities to customers in a way that is digestible and in a way that is approachable, right? We all remember those baristas from, I want to say that they are on the decline right now, but I do remember 2017, 2018, you go to cafes, you get given a bunch of information. Oh, this is 2,000 meters above sea level coffee. There's a double wash, Kenyan, blah, 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 blah. And like customers were like, okay.
What are you talking about? Yeah.
And then they were tasting and they were like, I did not get the berries. And maybe the berries were not even there, because there was the barista tour, as we call it. I think that has washed down a little bit. I think that got better, especially after the pandemic. But it is something we need to work on, and it is something that I think business owners need to be mindful of. The sustainability to our entire coffee chain is on the consumer. We need to look after the consumer a lot. We need to protect it, and we need to educate it as well.
Do you think that maybe we have oversold the idea of specialty and the role it plays within society in terms of like the growth and perhaps because I'm saying this because for farmers, it doesn't necessarily mean that if you sell a coffee for more money, you make more margin on that product, right? So you could effectively make more money selling an 81 or an 82 at scale than you could selling an 83, 84, 85 that you're getting more per pound for, right?
Yes.
So maybe the idea isn't to sell so much specialty, and because I think a lot of the coffees that are being sold in the market could be just a commercial coffee. It's for milk. What do you think?
But it's the same as the coffee shops, right? Like if you build your business model in the coffee shop thinking that, I don't know, you're going to get 100 customers coming in and buying the top shelf stuff, that's a very kind of fragile business model. So what you do is you're like, okay, I have a coffee machine. I need to make at least this many cappuccinos or Spanish lattes, whatever you want to make, per day to pay the bills. And then I'm going to add these other products as well to the thing. And I think that is something that we do work with farmers a lot. We do work on the feedback a lot as well. This is actually a very sensible topic. You're making me talk a lot. But this is good. Sometimes when you go to farms, you might be wowed by a particular experience. And you
sensory
need
experience or just like overall?
Let's say you find a coffee that is 88 points and it really blows you away. You need to find an appropriate way to communicate that with coffee producers in a way that also does not create incredibly high expectations. For example, we have had this issue in Ethiopia a couple of years ago. We started doing carbonic maceration. The first batch went great. We were very happy. The second batch was not great. The second batch, I mean the second year. was not great from a particular washing station. But we said, oh, okay, maybe something happened. Okay, no problem. Because we pay anyway. The person working there were like, man, I'm the boss. I'm doing great. So then coming third year, we have the same level of inconsistencies that we were not getting from other washing stations. And that's when we started looking into it, and we realized that the work was not being done. Because for some coffee, not producers, but even like people that work at the actual washing station, coffee is a silent product. It's coffee. So if a green cherry went in, who's going to notice? Well, we notice eventually, but that's a part of information they did not have.
They don't have the feedback loop, yeah.
And they didn't know that we were noticing. And we were like, oh my God, maybe something happened. Maybe it's the rainfall. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. Okay, no problem. We pay anyway. And this kind of feedback loop needed to be there to have complicated conversations or complex conversations in which we were, are the tanks actually be sealed properly? So when you go to a normal farm, let's just say that they're not doing a special processing or anything like that, and you do find a coffee that is 88 points, you do need to be responsible on what kind of feedback you give. Because if you go, you're the man, this is amazing, this is great, you know, you're going to become rich. And then next year that doesn't happen. There's a very weird expectation being created on the coffee producer, especially if that coffee producer is not familiar with cupping or with tasting or with what they did that created that final product. And this is why, again, we work in Project Origin. 80% of our relationships are ongoing relationships. We work with the same farmers year after year. We work with them either if things don't go great, because we look at the patterns and we try to find solutions for these things. But we are not backing the winning pony every single year. You know, I know there's companies, and that's completely fine, that go and say, we go and we select the best.
Gotcha.
I wish that was my job. It'll be a lot simpler, but we do not go and just select the best because you don't know if that thing is going to be there next year again. So you want to ensure that that thing is there next year. And that, to me, is starting to get us close to sustainability. Yes.
Gotcha. And so in your sort of experience at Origin, what are the things that contribute to quality either positively or negatively at the farm level? What have you found that are kind of...
At the farm, again, please, these opinions are just my own, but at a very, very broad, you do need to start with somewhat an okay soil. I'm not going to say it, of course, it needs to be virgin soil, volcanic. Like, I mean, not everybody can afford that. So at a bare minimum, something that is okay.
And when you say okay, do you mean it has a relatively good mineral composition?
Yes. Okay. Or you choose to put some fertilization, or you choose to put some organic fertilization. At least. The trees do need to eat. However, we have seen, amazing coffees coming from Ethiopia, and a lot of those are wild coffees. They're just growing the nature. There's not many people manicuring those trees. But that's like, I would say, a small, maybe 10%, 20%, I'm not sure. Variety does play a role, but if you have no choice, I'll be choosing something that has been tried and has been tested, and if possible, has good yielding. So there are some coffee trees that are exciting, or some new species that are exciting, but if productivity is low, I personally would be being careful with those. And then I think there's a big chunk on fermentation, huge part on fermentation. Of course, picking, very important. If you pick and more than 30% of that picking or 20% of that picking is green cherries, man, doesn't matter what you do to it, it's not going to be good. But if your picking is okay and your selection is okay and you do want to ferment, you can make a lot of bang for buck in there. We did work for some time where we're still working with this farm in Colombia, where the starting point coffee was 78 points. And we moved the dial all the way to 85, 86 points. So when you put those coffees next to the Panama ones that we are fermenting on tanks, they're like, oh, well, 86, why bother? And I'm like, well, why bother? Because we were starting from 78. So you can make a positive change. Can you create always 90-point coffees? I don't think so. I think it's a combination of the three things: soil, variety, fermentation / drying techniques, or post-harvest techniques, as they call them.
I think on Cup Score, how many actual 90-point coffees and above have you tried in your life? Because I think there is a tendency within the coffee industry to overstate how many points a coffee gets, and also like how rare a 90-point coffee is.
Yes. I love to cup with you because we are very harsh on our scoring system, and also we are very harsh on the actual consistency of that cup. Let me give you an example. If we have coffee that went into a tank and then it came out and is nice, that coffee gets cupped more than 7 times to make sure that that coffee is nice, and it gets cupped blindly every time. And it gets moved around, and we get different feedback from different people to make sure that that coffee is that. So we tend to be quite strict with it. I have had scenarios where coffee arrived, and there was a scenario a couple of years ago. We sold this coffee that was meant to be 91 points, and it arrived, and for us was 88. So we contacted the customer. We said, look, you can cancel it if you want. Here's the coffee. And if you choose to go ahead, this is the discount. And they said, we still think it's 90-point coffee, but sure, okay. And we were like, no, it's not. So we tend to be quite strict with it. In saying that, we are also quite strict with how we score in coffees. Something I've noticed in the general view, I guess, of course, out of all the people that work in the specialty coffee, how many of those can actually score or know the rules for scoring? Now you're talking about a much smaller percentage. And out of those, how many actually understand that a high cup score doesn't mean I love it, I will buy it, and a low cup score means I don't like it. You can still not like it, but it's an 86-point coffee. You can still say, you know what, I personally myself, I don't like mango in real life, like as a fruit. Okay. But man, I see mango in coffee, and that scores very high, that is rare, that is tropical, that is delicious. So you need to dissociate a little bit of like your personal taste and your personal like with what the cup score is. So in that regards, I can say I have tasted easily more than 100 coffees on over 90 points. Yes, for sure.
As a percentage of all coffees that you've cupped, is that
yeah, nice one. I would say it's probably like 20% or 10%, like along those, maybe 15, 20. Just because like we Project Origin source coffees that are strictly specialty. We start on 83 points. We have the occasional exception to the rule for a 82-point coffee, but most of the time it's 83 and above. And a lot of the customers we work with manage that kind of quality. So I do remember one trip with Sasha where there were some commercial coffees in a different table, and he's like, oh, this would be a good test for you. Come and taste and score. And for the first time being properly exposed to commercial coffees, and I was like, oh, wow, like I thought they would not taste like much, and they do taste like things. They're just maybe a bit more offensive things. I just didn't expect them to go that direction, So now, especially when I'm calibrating groups or when I'm calibrating people, I said, look, citrus, orange, that's a miracle already, Getting a coffee that tastes like orange is a lot. I know that maybe we get a little bit spoiled and we go, orange, so average. But like, it's not. It's actually very hard to create a coffee that tastes like that.
So coming back into the origin, what are kind of some of the things that you've seen develop over the last, 7 years that you've been in the industry that are, let's say, troubling or are pain points for farmers, let's say in Kenya or Ethiopia or Colombia?
Yes. The biggest pain point that we find, and that continues to be the biggest pain point, I would say, is financing the coffee. Coffee producers get paid once per year, maybe twice, depending on the country. But let's just assume, let's go for the majority, like once per year. Imagine you and I, we receive our salary once per year, and it's entirely based on someone having a taste, of someone, having a look at like what we've done for a small period of time. So you might say, oh, but I work very hard. I came here every day. I came to the farm every day. And they're like, yeah, but this is not what we were looking for. So here's the offer. It's very heartbreaking. And when you receive that money, the first thing that a lot of coffee producers do is they pay their debts, they pay all the things they owe. Some of them pay some credits back. And after 6 months of that, cash is short again, and you need to fertilize, and you need to maintain the farm, and you need to do some pruning in order to have good yielding. So you need to reinvest in the farm, and maybe that money might be running short. If you're very good at administrating your own money, maybe you did set some money aside for that, but it's very hard. Like, you mentioned you study economics, right? And you study economics. There's a lot of coffee producers that have not had the ability to study something that has to do with that. There's a lot of baristas that went to school and still don't know how to handle money. So this is a very hard part of the coffee industry where they go, well, we wanted to produce more and we couldn't produce more, or the money was not at the right time. But when you look at when that money was needed, that's sometimes the time where coffees are just landing at the buyer's port, and the buyers go, well, money now? No, wait, I have to roast it and I have to. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges in the coffee industry is understanding the financing
of the farm
circle of
throughout
it.
the year.
And what happens is sometimes the farm goes to get a loan, and these loans have a different percentage of interest than you and I can get in countries like UAE or Australia.
Yeah.
It's much higher.
Much higher interest. Yeah.
Exactly.
And understandably from the bank's side, because it's a very risky
of course,
option
and
for
it's
them to lend
agriculture,
money.
you know, and so we do understand it, but then the capability to pay for that back becomes harder and harder, and you end up in this loop, pretty much this poverty loop in which you cannot get out. So this is another thing that we do talk about with coffee producers when things like this happen, and we're like, we just want to ensure that you don't get on that loop, because we need the best of you to be producing the best of this, rather than you worrying about how you're going to pay this or that, or getting a second job so you can,
Are there initiatives by any sort of NGOs or any governmental organizations to sort of offset the risk or the interest rates on those agro loans in any country that you know?
Not that I know of. However, I do know there are coffee banks in different countries, right? That would offer a different a rate that is maybe going with the industry itself. Sometimes with some of the producers we work with, we do that ourselves, and we go, okay, cool, cash in advance comes here. This is what it means. This is how much it means to us. Sure, we can afford it, but then we are expecting this quantity, right? Quality is always like a little bit up to the coffee gods as well, but definitely the quantity. So, for example, the carbonic maceration projects that we have in Kenya, they do need that level of cash influx to ensure that we do get the cherries that we need at the time we need them. But I don't know of NGOs that are doing that. I heard so many different cool ideas, even some of them that had to do with cryptocurrency and this kind of stuff, but not that I have seen working yet.
You were just in Africa, right?
Yes.
Were you in Kenya?
In Kenya and Ethiopia.
Yeah. Do you know much about the new law around licenses for milling and that kind of change?
I know a little bit about it. What I know is like now coffees need to go through the auction process unless the farm is registered as an exporter.
It's a little bit like an ECX
license.
kind of thing from
It's
Ethiopia,
like an ECX.
Right?
Exactly.
Could you just explain that just quickly?
Exactly. ECX doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
But back on the day in Ethiopia, coffees would get sorted by this kind of like government-run company, and they will classify them based on their regions and based on their cup quality / defects. So that was the grading, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. That's why back on the day you could find grade 3s that cup very nice, but maybe had a lot of defects, or the other way around. You could find grade 1s that were immaculate when it comes to green grading, but maybe flavor or maybe cup score was not that high. Originally, that trading was done between Ethiopian exporters themselves and the producers themselves, and it was done face to face. So we, for example, were able to say, okay, we know this is a Yirgacheffe grade 1. However, because the exporter we work with knows the producer, we know this actually comes from Conga. So we were able to put that extra traceability. But if you were buying from a bigger trader, maybe you didn't know that, or maybe that bigger trader sent somebody to do that purchasing, and then they just end up with a Yirgacheffe wash. And so that was the thing. Then eventually that became online. So we lost the face-to-face. We lost a bit of the traceability. And that's the year where everything became Yirgacheffe or Sidamo. And that was it. And we barely knew anything else. And now with the removal of that, now we are basically just buying direct. But then the government, not being in the middle, has created a lot of fluctuations of what is actually grade 1. Right. So in Kenya now they have installed this system where you do need to sell the coffees through the auction, and there has to be bidders. So for example, we were able to take some coffees in Kenya that later on the exporter we were with said, actually, we lost that coffee.
Just to sort of structure it for the listeners, this is in place because you have to have an export license, right? Someone who is an exporter, and then a producer. And then there's the mill in the middle. Or the auctionee kind of house.
Yes.
Right. And so if you you can't just sell your coffee. You have to, if you're the producer, you have to put it through the system.
Correct.
Someone then has to buy it, which is hopefully you.
Yes.
And then if you wanted to also export, and then.
But you can bypass that if they get that license.
You can bypass this?
Yes,
you can. Okay.
And that's what we've done. Okay. So, for example, we have a lot of coffees that went into tanks and became carbonic maceration coffees, and that's okay. Those coffees don't go through the auction. They just get sold directly to us. But there are a lot of specific rules. For example, one is the coffee must be milled at their facilities. They cannot send the coffee in parchment or in pod to an exporter to be milled. It has to left mill their facility. So David Maguta, with whom we were a couple of weeks ago, show us kind of the new equipment and investment he had to do on his farm in order to be able to do this. Yes. Gotcha. Uh-huh. So it's not a bad thing, I would say, or at least it's not affecting us negatively. We'll see how it works. It's the first year.
Okay. All right. So to come to your Brewers Cup thing that you did, you were the Australian champion for 2019.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
What was the lead up to that? Why did you want to compete? What was the impetus for I want to be on stage and represent this coffee? And also, how did you approach both the compulsory and the what's the other one called?
Yeah, open service.
Open service, here we go.
Yes. You want the true story or the...
Preferably.
Preferably the true story. So I had a big crisis. I'll try to make it very short. I had a big crisis with the coffee industry in 2018. I was pretty much ready to leave it. It was due to women in coffee not having the space that I thought they deserve. And in the very general view, seeing a lot of male talking to female counterparts saying, "Oh, but you're learning, or you're not there yet." A lot of these things, and I was like, "Man, how long are we going to be learning for?" I get it. We are in this industry learning. I get that, but I see people with a lot less building crazy businesses and careers and consultancies and all these things. And I was like, man, and this lady, she's done all these things and not even invited to that table. So I was really upset at all of that. I did a lot of judging that year. And I could see it even backstage, the lack of confidence that a lot of the female competitors. And then I decided, okay, well, I have two options. Either I stay and I try to change that, or I leave. I met my coach at that time. She's not a coffee coach, but a life coach sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And I started working very hard on that. And that year I met Agnieszka from Poland. And she called me because she needed some coffee for her nationals. And I was like, oh, this girl, she's very cool. We are talking a lot anyway. So I'm like, you know what? I think we can help you for Barista Worlds. And then we do help her for Barista Worlds. And then she becomes the first female to win Barista Championships in the world. This girl was extremely doubtful a couple of months ago and telling me, look, if I make semis, I'll be happy. And because I was doing all this coaching and stuff, I was like, no, you have to aim for it. At least aim for it, and then we'll see where you end up. and she won by more than 50 points, So
In the final?
Yes.
Wow.
So that was kind of like a bit of a eye-opening for me.
She's the Jasper Ethiopian, right?
She did. So that was leading into my regionals, and I decided, okay, fine, I'm gonna do competition then, but I'm gonna do something I've never done before, because if I do barista, which I've done previously, people can say, oh well, but she's done it before. So I chose Brewers Cup because I've never brewed a coffee in my life, and I was like, oh well, if we're aiming for the impossible, let's go for this one. No female has until that time won Brewers Championship in Australia. So I started training in the month of August, and in October I was doing regionals. I won the region. I ranked first in the country. I qualified for nationals, and then I won the nationals. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. And then I went to Worlds, represented Australia. But my big key thing was I won girls in Australia to understand that this is doable and is possible. I know that there are unfair things in the industry, and I know that there are things that are maybe not shared, fairly, but also we need to own the part that is on us. And that's like, well, are we actually aiming for it? Are we actually trying to get this thing? Are we actually trying to be CEOs? Are we actually trying to be world champions? So yeah, that was my reason why.
Okay. And the coffees you use for both?
I use a Ethiopian coffee for regionals because I wanted a coffee I had a volume of. I didn't feel like I could jump on a fancy car and have a Panama for 1 kilo or half a kilo. I needed more. So at that time, I was able to afford 8 kilos of Ethiopia CM. Ethiopian CMs are not crazy expensive. And actually, the year that Aga won, which was 2018, the same year that I jumped in, her coffee cost back then, I think it was like $28 per kilo USD. After she won, we had like a 2-second conversation with my boss saying, well, should we change the price? I was like, nah, leave it.
Yeah.
And it was great, because a lot of people was like, oh my God, you have this coffee? And we're like, yeah, we do. We had it since the beginning of the year, but it was overlooked before. So yeah, we don't think that necessarily this competition is to be so inaccessible. We think that there's room for everyone in it, but also it needs to be a willingness to want to be part of it.
We actually bought a Jasper lot from you guys for competition here in either 2019 or 2020. It was like amazing coffee.
Nice.
But how do you feel about that, like pricing to cup quality versus pricing to, I guess, scarcity, which would be like the only reason that an Ethiopian is cupping at the same, thing is because of its scarcity?
Yeah. Well, when
or lack of scarcity, what I mean.
Yeah. I had a conversation with one very important coffee producer in Colombia once, and I remember they were telling me how they chopped off like 15,000 trees of a particular very wanted coffee, and I was like, "What do you mean you chopped it off?" And they're like, "Well, you don't make a lot of money if you have a lot of it."
All right.
And I was like extremely shocked. I was very new to green beans, and I was like, all my ideas change. And when we were able to create some of the first successful carbonic macerations, we were like, so what do we do now? And for us, the natural thing was like, well, let's go higher volume, see if we can sustain higher volumes. And the year we've done the most, we made 60 tons of experimental process coffee from Ethiopia only. And this is one of the things that helps keep the price also affordable for coffee roasters. We could have stopped at a couple of boxes and maybe auction them or things like that, but that was never on our hearts, I guess. We wanted everybody or as many people to access these kind of coffees. Today, Ona Coffee uses carbonic maceration on one of their blends. We actually do have some other roasters in Australia that do the same because they're like, we also want to use this special process on a blend. And this is something
that raspberry candy? Is that
yes.
Okay, got it.
And this is something that was unheard of in, 10 years ago. Why would you put a coffee that underwent special processing in a blend? But our question was, why not? If we can create a system that makes this coffee accessible to more people and potentially have competitors that can go like Aga and compete with a coffee that was actually affordable, a coffee that other competitors that went into that competition that year did taste and did reject. So that was kind of like also very nice to see. Well, our radar for potential is working, and also our radar for potential competitor was also working because we were able to spot. At that time, she was only a barista that was independent. She was not representing any company. And we could see there was champion material in there.
And just for the listeners, I didn't clarify that very well just before. What we were talking about there was the coffee isn't necessarily priced as per its cup score. For example, some Ethiopians taste or cup just as good as, let's say, a Panamanian coffee, but the Panamanian coffee, due to its scarcity relative to Ethiopia, is priced much more higher. I mean, among other things like marketing
cost
and
of
all
production.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah, correct.
So, yeah. Cool. What advice would you give to aspiring females anyone, females, males in the industry that are looking to either sort of compete or get into, we've got a lot of baristas here, right? And how do they sort of take the next step? What would your advice be to get into something else that has let's say, a greater career trajectory?
Yes, 100%. I think that the very, very important thing is you need to look within and really ask yourself what's the thing you're trying to get out of it. Coffee is such a novel product. And
novel?
No, like good. Novel, like
new?
Nice.
Nice. Okay,
nice.
Novel. Okay, gotcha.
Yes. It's such a nice product that keeps on giving to everyone, and it's a luxury product, but it's known by everyone. Rich people know coffee. Poor people know coffee. It's accessible to all the social classes, and I think that a lot of us get to pursue our dreams through coffee. Whatever that dream is. Maybe your dream is to live in a mountain and have a farm, and you see how coffee producers love coffee for the plant. And they show you and they're like, oh, this is the Sidra and this is the geisha and this is and then you can take a barista back to that farm and you're like, okay, point at the geisha, and they have no idea, right? Because we love a different part of coffee. But we are in love with the same concept. So coffee will open doors for you, and it's a great avenue to pursue that thing you want to pursue. But you have to decide yourself what that thing is. Sometimes that thing could be as simple as like, I want to make a living and I want to be happy. Sometimes that thing could be as ambitious as I want to be a champion. Sometimes that thing could be, I want to be a communicator and share a positive message with the world. Sometimes it could be an economical thing about like, I want to be rich. It doesn't matter. But you have to decide what is the thing you want first in order to find those steps, right? So if what you want to do is to do competitions, let's say, for whatever reason, famous or it doesn't matter, then yes, the first thing is, well, read the rules a million times, learn what is required of you. The rules are the key to how to win this thing. The answer on how to score 100 points is written right there. So all you have to do is read it and understand it. If you don't understand it, ask the questions. Something I do advise when I coach competitors is please go and make new mistakes, but don't make old mistakes. If somebody already made this mistake, why couldn't you just learn from that person, So pay attention, listen to other competitors, ask them, but what went well? What would you have done differently? What do you think that it could have improved? And absorb this information from them as well. You don't have to, make you don't have to come and say, I think I went over time. Come on. Like that's a common mistake that competitors made. Maybe you can already practice to not go over time. But if you come off stage and you tell me, you know what happened to me? This thing that has never happened to anyone, great. We are all learning. So yeah, read the rules, practice, because nobody got there. Nobody's born with the ability to taste coffee, which is something I love about coffee. So you can get in when you're 18, you can get in when you're 16, you can get in when you're 25 or 35. It doesn't matter. And you can be world champion when you're 21, like you can be world champion when you're 40. It doesn't matter. So it's a very plain field when it comes to that. Opportunities might be a little bit different here and there, but you can also search for those opportunities because coffee is very generous. It's a very generous product that there's room for everyone, I think, in coffee. So yeah, look within and then start finding out.
Okay. And as kind of like a last sort of bit, where do you sort of see this industry in the next sort of 5 to 10 years? What are the major issues that we're going to
Yes, so we need to be
come up against?
Yes, we need to be very mindful of climate change and the production of this coffee. We also need to understand that as we grow and as we calibrate ourselves with, newer coffees, different coffees, we need to stay calibrated with standard coffees. And what I'm saying by that is 10 years ago, a coffee that tasted like mandarin was wowing us. And today, a coffee that tastes like mandarin feels more normal. But we can't lose track that mandarin is still a pretty good coffee. I think that is a very important thing because we are seeing this with, like, for example, the surge of infused coffees around the industry, that this is, to me, the result of the industry going, we want more, we want more, we want more. And then we can't have more because now we want this and now we want flavors that we have never seen before. And where is this going to go? To the point that then when we taste chocolate orange, we think it tastes like nothing. So we need to be very careful with this, I think. There's nothing wrong with infused coffees if people like them, if people enjoy them. We should not then go back to a standard wash coffee and say 82 points, it tastes like nothing. This is very important and very, very dangerous. And then the communication with the final consumer. I think the industry is changing for good when it comes to technology. I think machines are getting better. I think grinders are getting better. I think things are getting more automated. Today, you can have capsule coffees that taste very nice. You can have parachute coffees that taste very nice. And this is something that 5 years ago, 7 years ago, we could not even imagine. So I think baristas should not be fearful of this future. I think this is our opportunity to continue to add that customer service and that human touch, especially when it comes to Dubai. Something that I love to do is when I'm on the plane, I love to watch some of these travel videos, Dubai, like you see Jumeirah and this, and it looks amazing. And there's these buildings and like indoor waterfalls, like all these crazy things. But I always said, I do the exercise to watch the video and just remove the people from it. And you just have empty buildings. La Perle wouldn't be amazing if there wasn't, because there's spectators to look at it and to go, wow, that was incredible, I really like it. So I don't think we should fear machines that can pour great espressos. You know what? If machines can pour better espressos than humans, we should celebrate that, because we would always have human to consume this espresso, and we would always have a barista communicating with that human about what this coffee means and what this coffee makes you feel. So I think that the customer service is going to go way more intense. It's going to become more important. Empathy is going to become more important. Understanding customer needs, anticipating customer needs is going to become more important, which as humans is what we do great. So I don't fear the future. I think the future is quite bright for baristas and for coffee professionals, but we just need to keep developing this.
That would assume, though, that the customer who is having those experiences made by the robot is actually, it fundamentally changes the way they want to consume espresso, right? Because currently, sometimes customers don't want to know about anything.
That is true, but customers go to coffee shops. Like the question is like, why do customers go to coffee shops? Why they don't drink coffee at home? Why they don't drink instant coffee? And you could say, well, they like quality. Okay, let's assume they can access quality at home. Why do they go to coffee shops? They go to coffee shops to talk, to connect, to see other people, to be seen sometimes in a particular place, to mingle, to meet other people. So we should not forget that coffee shops back on the day started revolutions. They are hubs. They are hubs where people talk. They are hubs where people do things. They are hubs where people fall in love. And this is going to continue to be the place, especially as more and more high buildings rise up. Where are we going to meet? You can't really meet your neighbor anymore like you used to probably do in New Zealand, go outside, play on the street. So the coffee shops are continue to be that social center, I think, for all of us. And I think the hand of the barista and the hand of a coffee professional that is behind that has high customer service skills, it's going to be very valuable in the future.
Okay. Rock and roll. Well, I think that's us for the podcast. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
No,
and hopefully we get to do it again sometime, somewhere in the coffee verse.
That'd be amazing. Thank you so much, Drew.
And we're done.